So, I actually have one more question, and it's more based off advice. So, like, what advice would you give to someone that may be ashamed to announce that they are a virgin?
Don't worry about what people think, man. This world, one thing that I hear all the time, and you as a Christian, I know that you experience that, and then we've been experiencing it more and more as Christians is, people trying to force us to accept them for the way that they are, but then turn around and not being able to accept us for the way we are. So I guess my advice would be, um, tell them to shut up. I mean, just don't be ashamed of it. Because if you're ashamed of it, you'll eventually give into it. Because you'll want to get that over with. Because if you're ashamed to admit it and you don't give into it, it means that the only reason you're not giving into it is because of guilt. And you might say, oh, that's not why I haven't given in. Well, if that's not why you haven't given into it, then it's really kind of, I don't want to say that it has to be either or, but it really kind of does because either either you're ashamed of it and you haven't given in because of guilt, or you want to give in and you just haven't done it yet. So you have to you can't let what people think about you be the sole reason of why you are worried about sharing that. Be proud of it. Even if you're not a Christian, if you are a woman or a man who is just not willing to just do that with just anybody, if you want to wait, kudos to you. Wait and don't worry about what people think. If a man or a woman does not want to be with you because you're a virgin, they don't deserve you anyway. And I don't know, like I guess my thoughts are I remember back when I was in youth group and I was one of the older ones, and this was before Jesus in my life. Um, but one of the girls that was younger than me that kind of looked up to me was talking to me about it. And she said, she said that she was ashamed to admit that she was a cheerleader, and every other cheerleader, and we're talking about middle school age, every other cheerleader though that she cheered with either actually had or admitted to saying that they had, even though they hadn't, just because they wanted, to fit in and wanted to be one of the popular ones. And the cheerleaders were supposed to be popular, but if you hadn't done that, then you weren't popular. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about fitting in. There was a quote from a movie, and I can't remember what movie it was. I want to say it's What a Girl Wants, but don't quote me. I remember Amanda Bynes was in it, but the guy told her, he was like, "Why are you trying so hard to fit in when you were born to stand out? If you have chosen, and if you have chosen to not give in to the push to lose your virginity or the push to sleep with just anybody, if you have made that decision, be proud of it, own it, rock it, because that is so, 50 years ago, people would not be virgins and would say that they were just because that was the way things were back then. Just because the way things are now doesn't mean you have to be ashamed of how you decided to to save yourself. And I don't want this to turn into one of those topics where, you know, I say just be yourself, and that's taken way out of context. But I will be bold enough to say, if you are living this life and you're doing the best you can, and one of the decisions you've made for your life is for you to save yourself, kudos, rock it. You put that persona on you and just rock it. Don't worry about what people say. Don't worry about what people think. They don't care what you think about them. If they did, then they would be worried about what you thought of them not being virgins. So don't worry about what people think about you, because this life is really too short for that. like the way that as an adult, as a grown adult now, I've not always been this way, but what I've learned is I care about how what two people think about me. Like I truly care about what two people think about me. That's God. Let's go back. Three people. That's God, that's Jesus, and that's myself. Because at the end of the day, God is the one I have to answer to. Jesus is the one that that has died and rose again and is continuing to sanctify me despite my sins. And I'm the one that has to live with myself. I have to live with myself every day. And living with myself is not going having to live with myself is the only thing that should determine whether or not I'm okay with something I've done or not. Now, has there been temptations? Yes. I was when I was in high school, I had a friend who was gay, and I loved him as a friend. He convinced me and another friend of mine. He wanted to see what gay porn was like, and I was like, as someone who was very, very innocent, and I'm not going to say sheltered, but I was very innocent. I didn't understand a lot of things when I was in high school. I learned a lot in high school on the sexual field. And seeing that was a moment of it was a moment of clarity for me. You know, this is not what I want with my life. I don't want to fit into these regulations and to in these not regulations, but into these parameters of what people have set for me. I want to break out of that. And it's weird that that came from that moment of being in that situation with them and being convinced to do something, to watch something that was definitely not going to be anything that I would want anyway as a heterosexual female, and he was a gay guy watching men, but it was in that moment when I realized, and I've been growing on that since, is I don't have to give in to those things. I gave in to that moment just because I didn't want to be the one left out of that of that hang time. And now looking back, if I could go back and change that to where I could honestly say that that is something I've never ever watched, I would love to. Now I'm not saying that I'm not trying to shame anyone if you have had um addictions with pornography and stuff like that. I'm not trying to shame that. I know that's another topic for another day, but I'm saying that stuff can come out of those moments, those learning moments, and that was a learning moment for me, um to not be ashamed of who I was, because I never want to be put in that position again of having to make myself smaller to fit into this circle, to be a part of this group, especially on something that I knew was wrong. You know, in one of the Bible verses, it's talked about sexual immorality. Pornography falls within that. And I knew that before I even really understood what pornography was. I knew that that was bad. I knew that I had heard of people who had been caught with, watching those things. I knew that, if you had to be careful on the internet because ads would pop up. And if you click on the wrong ad, then it might take you to something like that. But I never understood the depth of it. I never understood the intensity of it until that moment in that situation. And for me, it was that kind of became the moment. That also became the moment of when I was like, I'm never going to put myself in a situation to not be myself. So when I would hang out with friends, I might be the designated driver. That might be my excuse to drive, but I never use being the DD as an excuse anymore. People would say, instead of saying, people would say, "Oh, you want to drink?" No, I can't because I'm driving. I'd say, "No, I don't want to drink." Or, "Hey, you want to smoke a little bit of this?" No, I sure don't. And it was that moment that defined that. So do not be ashamed. Do not worry about not fitting in with your friend group if you're if you're if you're going to be different from them in certain ways. I am the only virgin in my friend group. That's not my church friend group, which actually all of them are all my church friends are married. So I guess I'm still the virgin and all that too. But I mean, even if I wasn't, I mean, even if I wasn't the only one, I'm not going to, like, every single person in my friend group knows, Caitlyn's virgin. Caitlyn's not going to drink. Caitlyn's not going to smoke. Caitlyn's not going to cuss. Because Caitlyn does cuss, but only when she gets mad, like it, and I always feel super bad afterwards because I'm thinking, what kind of reflection of Christ is that? So just I know this has been a long advice section, but my advice would be: do not let the standards of this world, the parameters that this world has tried to fit us in, keep you from being the oddball out, even if that means you have to be by yourself, even if that means you have to hang by yourself, even if that means that you don't get invited to the party, even if that means that you're left off the guest list to the wedding, even if that means that you slowly are pulled out of that friend group, even if they tend to leave you behind. It is much better to be left behind and be by yourself and be to your own devices than be a part of something and know that that's not who you are. Period. No matter if it's virginity, no matter if it's you not wanting to drink, no matter if it's you not wanting to do drugs, because if you stay in those environments, you're either going to end up if you stay in those environments, you're going to end up not being true to who you are. You're going to end up giving in to these things that you have said, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this. You're going to end up giving into those things and then you're going to end up regretting it, period.